Where does the Constitution Party stand on the Federal Reserve? I know I'm hearing more and more people and seeing more and more people online that are against the Federal Reserve and Keynesian economics and fractional banking.
We are against the Federal Reserve and fractional banking, and the reason for that is the Federal Reserve has played with our money to a point where it's now so severely devalued that you can't buy. I'll give you an example. In 1973, 180 ounces of gold would buy you 2 Cadillac Eldorados. All right. Today, 180 ounces of gold wouldn't get you 1 Cadillac CTS. So that's ridiculous. To have that kind of erosion of your buying power in 30 years. Some inflation is going to take place, some devaluation is going to take place naturally over time, but it shouldn't. The value of your money shouldn't fall by, your buying power shouldn't be cut by 50% over the course of 30 years. That's crazy.
Right, and sir, what always strikes me is how between the Federal Reserve in 1913 and what FDR did in 33 and what Nixon did in the 70s. I mean, the way I read the Constitution, it clearly states that the currency of the United States will be gold and silver, yet they've managed to completely remove us from a, quote, gold standard.
Yeah. The government or the Constitution doesn't make any provision for a central bank. It's been tried half a dozen times in the history of the United States, and each time it's failed. And you're absolutely right in that. Let's see, it's Article 1, Section 8 says grants only Congress the power to coin money and to regulate the value thereof, with no provision for such power being delegated to any other group. Article 1, Section 10 says no state shall coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver a tender in the payment of debt. So, and I think a first step to abolishing the Federal Reserve would be to audit it, show people exactly what it does and some of the goofy things it's trying to do with money, and the regulation of it,
And actually, sir, we were discussing Article 1, Section 8 just earlier in our show.
Okay.
Maybe this is just me, but I think issue I see is the whole National Guard system, which to me, in reality, is federal troops trying to do stuff that the Constitution reserved to a state militia. And basically, I personally am a proponent of going back to, state militia that is strictly controlled by the governor, that's state funded, and by Article 1, Section 8, that only Congress, not the president, only Congress could call into national service for actual national defense.
Yeah, well, Congress sold its responsibility for declaring war with the War Powers Act, which was shoved through during the Nixon administration or Ford administration,
yes.
I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But and Congress basically washed its hands of its ability to responsibility, not ability, but responsibility to declare war, and hence we have these things like, and I'm not going to argue the rightness or the wrongness of the wars themselves, but just looking at them from a constitutional standpoint, we have wars like Iraq and Afghanistan where they were never declared. They're not legal. Yeah. We're involved in. And Congress does nothing to stop them. They talk about how they care about the troops and stuff, but to really care about the troops would pretty much be to cut the funding for those wars. If the executive doesn't have money to buy bullets, they sure as hell can't go to war, can they?
Right. Well, they're certainly trying to. Well, two points I wanted to make about that, sir, is one, yes, it's my understanding Congress hasn't declared war since like June 5th, 1942, I believe, when we declared war on Italy, Hungary, and the rest of the Axis powers.
Oh, yeah.
And my second.
And how many Americans have died in combat since that time? I mean, look at now. There's what? There's almost 60,000 right there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Absolutely.
You know, and all those wars that we've gone into, the executive has launched into without the consent of the people's representatives in the House of Representatives or the representatives of the several states in the Senate. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's the way the system's set up, that the president can't go to war without the consent of the people or the states. We don't do anything in the United States under the Constitution without the consent of the people or the states.
Right, and I believe it's Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution that only then is the president the commander-in-chief. Some take that as it first requires Article 1, Section 8, the actual declaration of war and the calling up of the militias. But it brings me to my second point, sir, is that you mentioned the War Powers Act. I mean, me personally, I don't find that overly constitutional, because to me it kind of contradicts what was laid out in the Constitution.
Sure does.
And therefore, I think the Supreme Court needs to get off their butt and declare it unconstitutional, personally.
Yeah. Well, you need somebody to bring suit against it in the federal courts first, though. That's, the courts can't just out of hand,
right,
declare it unconstitutional. I wish they could. There'd be a lot of things we'd get rid of without ever them seeing the light of day, but.
Right, it's just happenstance of how it's set up.
It's the way it is. Mm-hmm. But that's a piece of legislation that went through Congress, and Congress abrogated its responsibility there, and has never seen fit to take that opportunity back. And it really needs to be done. It's a check on the power of the executive. We've raised the presidency to the status of an imperial throne, where the president practically rules by fiat. I mean, look at how many things in everyday life in the United States are settled by executive order. The whole Health and Human Services mandate I talked about earlier,
right?
Is a regulation that came out of a federal department. Nobody voted on that. My representative didn't have a voice in, my representative's Andre Carson, so he would have gone along with whatever the president wanted, but, nobody's representative voted on that.
No, absolutely, sir, and I'm glad you mentioned that up, because to me, these executive orders have gotten completely out of control. My understanding is that executive orders were originally intended for a president to host a foreign dignitary or some sort of state function without the express consent of Congress for the money for that event. Basically, it was for housekeeping things, if you want to call them that. Yeah, there you go.
More than anything else. Yeah, that's exactly it. The president ordered his official household with executive orders, which, that's just fine. You've got to have somebody. If the executive is the function, somebody has to tell the executives who work for the chief executive what to do. Mm-hmm.
And like you said, sir, I mean, it was never intended to give the president of the United States king-like powers.
Not the broad sweeping powers he has now, that's for certain.
No, it almost seems like he's using it when he's too lazy to try to push something through Congress.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
I said it almost seems like he's just using it whenever he's too lazy to try to push something through Congress, or when he doesn't think something's going to pass through Congress.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly the way this administration sees it. I mean, if you read President Obama's statements about how he's going to get things done regardless of Congress, and how he'll go it alone, and he just.
Yeah, it does. Now that I think of it, does kind of remind me of like when Rome overthrew the Senate.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So.
Well, and you look, and we're moving in that direction. I mean, the executive has seized more and more power. I mean, and Democrats aren't the only ones guilty of it. I mean, look at what President Bush did with his executive order authorizing the military to assassinate American nationals overseas. Mm-hmm. You know, the executive can assassinate, American nationals who are engaging in what they deem to be terrorist activity.
Right. And
well, what if it comes to a point where somebody decides that the Constitution Party is a little too vocal and Henzler's got to go? I mean, if it plays in Kabul, who's to say it doesn't play in Indianapolis?
Right.
Well, doesn't that what the NDAA allows now? Assassination of American citizens or detainment without.
The NDAA doesn't authorize assassination, but it does authorize indefinite detention.
Indefinite detention. Okay.
The way it's worded, it's detention until the cessation of hostility. Well, I've got news for you guys. The war on terror is never going to be over.
No, it's not news to me. I try to tell people that every day.
Now, I'm going to tell you that terrorism is a real threat to the United States. But there's a constitutional way to go about it without violating the rights of the citizens. Is it going to entail a little more sacrifice on behalf of people? Yeah, I think it is, because, like in any war, you're going to win some battles and you're going to lose some battles. So bad things are going to happen in the course of the war of terror, but terrorism's been around for thousands of years. I mean, and it's not going away.
Right. Well, another thing that really that I see that really bothers me, and I constantly bring it up in a debate, is that the terrorists are wanting to win their, quote unquote terrorists are wanting to win their little battles and take out a few people before they go, maybe, but the whole overall scheme is to get us scared and paranoid. And they're, as evidenced by all the laws that have been passed, especially, here recently the past few years, it seems like that they're getting exactly what they want to begin with, Sure. They
want to see our freedoms restricted. They want to see an unhappy populace at home. Their intent is to destabilize, the United States, and I'll tell you that government oppression is as much instability as mobs rioting in the streets. Mm-hmm. We face the same danger. I mean, it's not much of a life when you've got government watching everything you do and providing everything for you. You lose a lot of your ability to pick and choose what you want to be able to do.